Ships in the kingdom, and then kind of a three-part speech that is chapter 23, chapter 24, and chapter 25. And last week we studied chapter 23, which is Jesus' denunciation of the hypocrites, the Pharisees. And he had 7 woes. And some people have noted that you've got the Beatitudes in chapter 5, the beginning is one of his great speeches. And then here in his last great speech, he has these 7 statements of woe, which some people, you can read this as he's very angry and he's saying, I'm going to get you. I'm going to see that you get what's coming to you. But I think it's more consistent with the character of Jesus that he's saying, I'm so sorry, it's going to be so bad for you. It's a statement made more in sorrow than in anger, more of pity. And certainly as he concludes that great speech in chapter 23, maybe you remember, maybe you don't, the last slide we showed last week was of the mother hen sheltering her little chicks. And so Jesus concludes this speech of denunciation, or this section of a speech of denunciation, by saying, how many times I would have sheltered you like a hen shelters her chicks, but you were unwilling. You were not willing. And one of the gospel writers even says that Jesus weeps as he sees these things, as he says these things, excuse me. So that builds a bridge on into chapter 24. And so this chapter 24 is a discussion, and it's confusing. I'll get to that in a minute. But it's Jesus talking about what's going to happen to this community, this city of Jerusalem. And then he gets on into the judgment day and the end of time. And that leads into chapter 25, 3 great vivid parables about the judgment. We know that these are separate speeches because they all end with a statement like the one you see at the bottom of the slide, or something very similar, when Jesus had finished saying all these things. So that's kind of a delineation of the speeches. I'd like to stop now and kind of give a sound check. As a person who's hearing challenged, I'm very sensitive to the fact that people need to hear. Can you hear it? Good. I'm glad. Everyone can hear fine. That's great. Thank you so much. Really appreciate the work of the guys upstairs, Bill and Brad and so forth, and the others that help us there. You know, maybe you have noticed, or maybe you haven't, I don't speak as loudly as Les Ferguson does. So those guys have to be on the job and, adjusting things a little bit. So, everything comes out all right. You've seen this slide a couple of times, and this is, a map of what people think first century Jerusalem was like. And you see the temple complex right here on the mid-right of the slide. And then you see off to the right 2 hills or mountains, the Mount of Olives and the Mount of Offense. And that curving red line, kind of like a backwards S there on the right, is the path that we think that Jesus took in and out of the city. The city was thronged with pilgrims for Passover at this Passion Week. And so Jesus had to commute to Bethany to have a place to stay at night. So he probably took this path. This was the way to get to Bethany. This is probably the path that he took for the triumphal entry and then going back and forth at night. So after he finishes chapter 23, his denunciation of the Pharisees and hypocrites, he leaves the temple complex. This marks the end of his public ministry, the end of chapter 23. And so with his disciples, they're walking the red line, and they climb up on the side of the Mount of Olives there and look back across the valley, the Kidron Valley. Maybe you can pick that out there. Kidron Valley is where you have this stream, this brook that comes down the, east side of the city. And they look back across the valley. And there in the sun is this great edifice, this great temple complex. Herod the Great was a horrible person, a horrible ruler. He was the Herod who was responsible for killing the baby boys in Bethlehem, but that was minor compared to some of the things he did. He killed a lot of his own family members. This was the kind of person he was. But he was a great builder. And so he is the one that built much of the temple complex And, these great structures are there. So Jesus and his followers are looking back across the valley. Now, this is a model. We don't have any photographs of first century Jerusalem. And this is viewing the temple complex from the south instead of from the east. But you can think, particularly in what we would think of as somewhat primitive first century world, to have this large a complex of buildings is quite remarkable. And some people say that the temple in Jerusalem was one of the wonders of the ancient world. So you see the big wall and the buildings and so forth in the upper right corner of the photograph there. That's the temple complex, and the temple proper is partially hidden by this structure with the brown roof. At any rate, this is something very impressive, and then Jesus makes this pronouncement. He says, "Truly I tell you, not one stone here will be left on another. Every one will be thrown down." Now, he's just gotten through denouncing this community, this system of religious leadership, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the Herodians. And okay, we're going to get rid of those folks, but this is the temple. This is the holy hill. This is Zion. This is the city of David. This is where the Holy of Holies is. This is where the Ark of the Covenant, or what's left of the Ark of the Covenant. This is where the Shekinah is, God's presence among his people. And Jesus says, not one stone will be thrown down. I can't really communicate to you the emotional, mental impact that this statement must have had. This is a weak way, but suppose that you're with someone who can foretell the future. Maybe you're with Jesus or somebody that you really respect, and you're at one of these places. You're standing on the Mall in Washington, D.C. All of our great monuments are there. The Washington Monument, of course, right in the middle. Lincoln Memorial down at one end. Capitol Building at the other end. And then all the great, the White House and the Smithsonian and so many other great buildings that line our National Mall. It's a place that's near and dear to the hearts, I think, of all Americans, and it's kind of a sacred place to us. And so he says, in just a few years, this is all going to be wiped out. This is all going to be gone. Or suppose you're on the Oxford Square, and somebody says, in a generation, this is just going to be a briar thicket. You may find a rock here and there, but it's just going to be all grown up with weeds and briars. Or maybe you're looking at the Lyceum on campus. It's been there since 1840. What? 48. It's been there since 1848. And somebody says, in just a few years, this is going to be, they're going to be cattle grazing out here. How would you feel? Or if we were standing outside on North Lamar and somebody pointed at this building, this campus, and said, in a few years, you'll have to look real hard to see there was ever a building here. It's going to be a parking lot. That would have a tremendous emotional impact on you. I'll never forget the first time I went to my grandparents' house after it burned down. Both of them had died, and like most families, my family had moved around a lot of different places. We'd lived in a lot of different houses, but my grandparents' house had always been there. During my entire lifetime, they had always lived in the same house. And when I went back and looked, and there was nothing but a hole in the ground and weeds growing up, it was so disorienting. How could this be? This is their house. It's always been here. I can't understand it. So when Jesus says, not one stone left upon another, that really rocks his disciples. And so we see this is an outline of our lesson today, an outline of what Jesus says, and it's hard to outline, by the way. But they get over on the Mount of Olives, and disciples came to him privately saying these three questions. This is verse 3. Tell us, when will this be, destruction of Jerusalem? 2, what will be the sign of your coming? That's 2. 3, and of the close of the age. So they're trying to find out, when you say it's going to happen, is it going to be next week, next year, sometime down the road. When is Jerusalem going to be destroyed? When are you going to come back again? And what is the sign of the close of the age? So we're going to try, and I want to stress the word try because this gets into some deep water. We're going to try to use this as a framework for our study of chapter 24. First question, when will Jerusalem be destroyed? Well, in our reading, you may notice that Jesus gives, his first part of his answer is, these are things that do not mean that Jerusalem's going to be destroyed, because all this stuff has to happen before Jerusalem is destroyed. So here's the things that do not mean that Jerusalem's about to be destroyed. There'll be false messiahs. There'll be wars and rumors of wars. There'll be famines. There'll be earthquakes. Most importantly, there will be a time of tribulation, of persecution of Christians. There will be false teachers, and here we're using the word apostasy, false prophets. It's interesting to me, if you just make a cursory survey of the New Testament, and you can do this pretty quickly with your word search and your computer Bible, if you'll notice the number of times that there's a warning issued by Jesus or by Paul or by another one of the writers about false teaching or false prophets, false doctrine. Because in our current cultural mindset, we're very pluralistic, and that means it's all good. Basically, it's all good. So if you have a religion, particularly if it has some flavor of Christianity, it's all good. You have your tradition, I have my tradition, that guy or that woman has their tradition. It's all just different traditions. They're all equally good or equally bad. And maybe that is a good development because of the Pharisaism and legalism and hair-splitting arguments and quarrels that Christians have been plagued with in the past. Maybe that's a good thing. I'm thinking there has to be some way for us to say, well, I may be wrong, and you may be wrong, but God's Word can lead us in the right direction. And with humility, let's search together and learn from each other. But let's accept the fact that it's not all equally good. If you go to a doctor and you want to find out what's wrong, he doesn't give you 7 theories and say, well, they're all equally good. You hope you'll be a little more definitive than that. He said there are 8 different medications I can prescribe for you. And they're all equally good. They're just all whatever. Just pick one. It doesn't matter. You don't really like that. And so the same way with our thoughts about Christian doctrine. And then he says preaching of the gospel throughout the world, and this expression throughout the world in this case I think deals with the known Roman world. This is verse 14. We didn't quite get to that in our reading. And this gospel of the kingdom, interesting, again, we see this emphasis on the kingdom in Matthew. This gospel of the kingdom will be preached throughout the whole world as a testimony to all the nations, and then the end will come. Okay, now what I'm arguing is that everything we've read so far is talking about the end of Jerusalem, the end of the Jewish holy place. But I want to tell you that, what do you call those milkshakes you go get and they've got all that good stuff mixed in with them? A slurry or something like that? Where do they sell those? What's the name of that place? We just got a new one in Oxford, Dairy Queen, right. So it's got all this good stuff kind of mixed in with it. Well, as you try to work through chapter 24, the answer to these 3 questions, what is the sign of the end of Jerusalem, destruction of Jerusalem? What is the sign of your coming? And what is the sign of the end of the age? These topics get mixed together some. But I want to argue that the first part of Jesus' speech here has to do with the end of Jerusalem, the destruction of Jerusalem. So this statement, if you're looking along with me in verse 14, and then the end will come, is talking about the destruction of Jerusalem. Well, at any rate, I want us to backtrack to verses 10 through 13. And Jesus gets into this this topic of cold love. Cold love. You know, that cold love, that sounds like a great name for a rock and roll popular song or something like that, cold love. You can almost hear the beat in the background. At any rate, he says, at that time, many will turn away from the faith and will betray and hate each other, and many false prophets will appear and deceive many people. Because of the increase of wickedness, the love of most will grow cold. And here's the thing. Persecution and tribulation and difficulty and pressure often make Christianity flourish and grow. It's been one of the paradoxes of time that when we are not persecuted, when, like, let's say in this country we have religious freedom, we do face some social ostracism, but for the most part, people leave us alone, and in many ways, Christianity is a good thing. And you even get calls from spam risk. That's a thing. At any rate, Christianity is a good thing. But when we kind of get out of shape, if you don't use your muscles, they get soft. And so the church should flourish, but it doesn't. But when it's persecuted and pressured, oftentimes it grows. But here's something else that happens. A lot of people that are spiritually weak, that are not devoted disciples, that are not committed, will fall away during these times of difficulty. And we call this cold love. Because of the increase of wickedness, the love of most will grow cold. Now, I'm going to take a real dive off the deep end here, so forgive me if I miss the mark with this. But I think that what we have experienced in the last year, 18 months, and what we are experiencing is a little taste of this. Now, the war against COVID-19 is the first war that I think people have fought sitting on sofas with TV remotes in their hand, okay? But a lot of you have suffered in many ways, and the church has suffered in many ways. And I think that our isolation from one another, the inability to be together physically on a regular basis, has really harmed our fellowship. And many people have fallen away from us and chosen to do otherwise. I'm not condemning those folks. Those people are among my best friends, okay? So I'm not trying to run anybody down. I'm just saying when the church is under certain kinds of pressure, Jesus says, watch out because love grows cold when you've got this kind of difficulty going on. But then Jesus kind of winds things up here, and he talks about, in verse 15, so when you see the desolating sacrilege, this is RSV, or in the NIV, the abomination that causes desolation, spoken of through the prophet Daniel, standing in the holy place, and this is a reference to the temple, then you know then that it's about to happen. In fact, in the RSV here, after the words holy place, they have let the reader understand. So he says, this is when things are about to get bad for Jerusalem. The abomination that causes desolation. Now this is almost a direct reference to, I think, 3 places in the book of Daniel that use this same expression. What is this abomination that causes desolation? And where is it in the holy place? There's a strict prohibition in the Old Testament law against graven images, against anything that is made to look like a statue of a person, an animal, a heavenly being, whatever, because those have become idols, right? And so to bring an image, a statue, or even a statuette, a figurine, into Jerusalem, into the temple, is an abomination. This right here may be what he's talking about. In the Roman army, the most feared military in the world for many centuries, they did not have flags. You know, we see movies and pictures of the Civil War and of the Revolutionary War, and they have soldiers marching. They always have these flags. But they didn't have flags. Instead, they had poles, and on the poles they had certain images. They were called standards or ensigns. And the Jews really didn't like it when the soldiers tried to bring their ensigns in Jerusalem, because these are graven images, and there was some controversy about this. But when in AD 66, the Jews finally got so rebellious against the Romans that they had a big riot and drove the Romans out. And so they were riding really high. Woo, we got rid of the Romans. The Romans sent their army, and at AD 70, they conducted a siege of Jerusalem. They sent some of their best legions there. They surrounded the city in April. It was thronged with Passover pilgrims. So there were a lot of people inside the city, not much food. And by September, October, they were pretty well starved out. The Romans stormed the city and commenced a horrible, horrible period of destruction. And there are many paintings, many works of art where people try to capture the terror of the Roman conquest. And this is just one of them. But Jesus warns his followers to watch for this. And when they see it happening, to get out, get out. And there is a tradition that the Christians who were in Jerusalem at that time, AD 70, did get out and flee to the city, the town of Pella, not too far away. Jesus puts it this way: let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let no one on the housetop go down to take anything out of the house. Let no one in the field go back to get their cloak. How dreadful it will be in those days for pregnant women and nursing mothers. Pray that your flight will not take place in winter or on the Sabbath, for then there will be great distress, unequal from the beginning of the world until now, and never to be equaled again. It was horrific. I want to call your attention to, in this painting, the lower left-hand corner. Do you see that? There you see the candlestick, the menorah, that's been taken out of the temple. The soldiers are marching away with it, or taking it away. They're looting the temple, and you see the Jews just being slaughtered, being killed right and left. If you go to Rome, and I thought I was doing such a good job making this slide, and I chopped off the important part up at the top. Now, how many people have been to Rome and seen the Arch of Titus? Okay, we've got a couple here, and you can correct me if I'm getting this wrong, but the Arch of Titus was built by this Roman general to commemorate his great victory in Jerusalem, the siege of Jerusalem, and to show what a great guy he was, and it's still there today. One of the panels on the Arch of Titus shows the soldiers marching along with their Jewish captives and with the candlestick that I pointed out to you earlier, the Jewish candlestick, and I think also the table that was from the temple where they placed the showbread. So this is a great trophy of war. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could find that candlestick again today? Here's what I want you to notice, though, is the text on this slide. It has been estimated that about 1/3 of the population of the Judean province was killed or enslaved as a result of the revolt. You didn't mess with the Romans, okay? And so they were really serious about this. They say, I've read one account that said they denuded the landscape, cutting down trees to make crosses to crucify the Jews on. It was just truly, truly horrific. The second question that the disciples asked Jesus was, what will be the sign of your coming? Something maybe a little bit more interesting and relevant to us. And one thing Jesus makes really clear is that his return will be obvious to everyone. I want to call your attention to the second paragraph here, the second block of text. He says, so if anyone tells you, there he is out in the wilderness, do not go out. Or here he is in the inner rooms, do not believe it. For as lightning that comes from the east is visible even in the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. It is truly remarkable how many times in the last 2,000 years people have claimed to have inside knowledge of the return of Jesus. I think in all due respect here, I believe that there's a doctrine, or at one time there was a doctrine among Jehovah's Witnesses that Jesus came back in 1914, but people didn't really know he was here or something like that. Jesus makes it clear that it'll be like lightning that illuminates the whole sky, that there won't be any question that he is returning. It will be quite obvious to everyone. Then we run into a very difficult verse. So if you want to just follow along, let's look at verse 28, 29. We just looked at verse 27 about the lightning, and then he says, wherever the body is, there the eagles will be gathered together, or maybe your translation says, there the vultures will be gathered together. We used to have an unusually large number of buzzards that circled the sky in the north part of Oxford. There was a buzzard's roost up there. I guess some of our development has eliminated the buzzard's roost, but we used to have, hundreds up that way. At any rate, when there's something dead, the buzzards will let you know because they start circling. So Jesus again is talking about obvious signs of the death of the end of Jerusalem, and maybe the eagles, the vultures, these are the Roman standards. I don't know. At any rate, he shifts gears into verse 29, and he says, immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, the stars will fall from the sky, and the heavenly bodies will be shaken. Now, that's set out like poetry there in this translation, and this really is pulled from a handful of Old Testament passages. That's not too difficult. That sort of talk is kind of poetry in the Old Testament for, hey, things are about to get really bad. The word that's difficult here is this word immediately, because you and I understand there's been quite a gap of time from 70 A.D. until 2021, and Jesus hasn't returned during that period of time. So I'm not sure why he says immediately here, except maybe the process begins immediately. In verse 30, he says, then will appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. He doesn't say the Son of Man, he says the sign of the Son of Man. I'm not sure what the sign of the Son of Man is. But as we study chapter 24, we collide with one of the difficulties in the book of Matthew as we talk about this great thing, the kingdom of heaven. And we've mentioned this several times, that John the Baptist, he came out and his message was encapsulated in the phrase, repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. It said Jesus started his preaching, and guess what his message was? Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. And then we get to the Sermon on the Mount, and he starts off and he's talking about the kingdom. He says, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. So it's a very kingdom-centric gospel. But as we struggle with the properties of the kingdom, we get into chapter 13, parables about the kingdom. Jesus says, the kingdom of heaven is like. Well, if you look at all this, it's like a lot of different things. So what is it anyway? Well, one of the things that people have used, and I think this is accurate to describe the teaching about the kingdom, is that it is, as you see here, not yet and now. It's not yet here, but in some ways it is here already, okay? So it has both properties. As Christians, we are challenged to maintain a balance in our view of the kingdom. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, if we say not yet, it means that we are looking forward to Jesus coming back and to being prepared for his return. And this is one of the great themes of this chapter 24 is get ready, be watching, be prepared, don't be careless, don't go to sleep, don't let it slide, follow Jesus every day, okay? Don't take a year off, don't take a day off, be a consistent, faithful servant of Jesus Christ. Then will appear the sign of the Son of Man of heaven, and all the peoples on earth will mourn when they see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he will send his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of the heavens to the other. The culmination of our Christian walk, the culmination of history, is this tremendous event, the return of Jesus, the end of time, Judgment Day. On the other hand, a lot of people say, well, if we just talk to people about believe, repent, and be baptized, become a Christian, then that's a cop-out. Because they feel like they can do that, and then, hey, they've got their insurance policy, they're insured against hell, and they can just go on and live their life and do whatever they want to do, and just, everything's good, and you don't worry about religion anymore, really. I mean, you might go to church every now and then, but you just don't worry about it too much. And they said that's not the way a disciple should live. A disciple should be trying to help that kingdom break into this world. They should be part of the fight against the kingdom of darkness. And so hunger and disease and ignorance and addiction and sickness, all these things, ignorance, we need to be fighting against these things. And so if we go all the way in that direction, if we don't maintain balance, we get this statement here: the kingdom of God transcends doctrine. In other words, it's all good. The focus of disciples should not be on what do we believe and how do we get ready for Jesus to come again. Instead, it should be on making the world a better place, this world, this here and now. In other words, don't be manning the lifeboats to get off the Titanic. Instead, let's schedule some interesting classes and discussions and paint the deck or whatever we need to do. Make the world a better place, more free, more just, more healthy, more happy, not on teaching people how to become Christians and building up the local church congregation. Focusing on eternal salvation is just a cop-out from being really engaged in the Lord's work and bringing the kingdom into this world. Well, which box is right? And again, I'm thinking that if we read the book of Matthew with an open mind, we see that they're both right to a degree, that we need to maintain a balance between making the world a better place and getting ready for Jesus to come again. So, the third question they ask is, what will be the sign of the close of the age? And Jesus says, there aren't any. He goes quite a ways around to say that, but he says, there aren't any. This is the key to his answer. He says, no one knows. Not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. Now, that's what you call a secret. That's what you call a secret. No one knows. The problem that we have as Christians is the same problem that some of us have as investors, and that is we would really like to time the market. We would really like to time the market. You see, the secret, and I'm offering you this free for nothing, okay? The secret to making money with your investments, making money in the stock market, is to buy low and to sell high. So, when the stock market crashed last year, March, April, if you had invested your money when we're down at the very bottom of that steep valley, then today you could sell your stock and you would be rich, 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 okay? And you see, this curve ends here in July 2021, and you see it's just kind of, boop, 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 it's kind of leveled off up there. So what's it about to do? Is it about to go back up again, or is it about to go down? There are lots and lots of people that are willing to take your money, and they will tell you that they know how to predict what's going to happen next with the stock market. And so, there is a word for people that like to time the market and like to jump in and out and try to make money that way. These people are gamblers. They are gamblers, and they might as well go to Tunica and just, play blackjack or roulette or whatever, because that's basically what you're doing. Jesus doesn't want us to try to time his coming, okay? And that's why he says no one knows. He wants us to be ready regardless of when he comes back again. So he kind of beats this point to death. At the end of chapter 24, there are four colorful, I'm going to call them parables, but you might want to call them illustrations of this final point. And these lead into, see the brown box there at the bottom, three great parables, longer parables in chapter 25, very vivid parables about the day of judgment. Okay, first of all, he talks about the days of Noah. He said it's going to be like the days of Noah right before the flood. And what we found there is people are buying and selling. They're having weddings, they're having funerals, they're making plans for the future, okay? They are completely oblivious to the fact that everything is about to change. They haven't listened to Noah's message, and so they're busy about the affairs of life. And, we kind of identify this as far as natural disasters go. We really don't know exactly when the earthquake is going to occur. We know we live close to the New Madrid Fault, and we know there was a great earthquake in 1811, 1812, And if we had another one, a lot of our houses would fall down, actually. But we just don't know when that's going to happen, and we kind of don't think about it much. We know that hurricanes occur. When I was growing up, we had Camille, and we thought there will never be another Camille. That was such a mega hurricane. It would be impossible in our lifetime to see another hurricane that great until 2005, and we learned that there could be an even greater hurricane than Camille, and we called it Katrina. So Jesus said that's what it was like in the days of Noah. Then he talks about, the idea that proximity is insurance against being lost spiritually. He said there'll be two men working in the field. One will be taken, the other one left. Jesus talking about gathering his elect, gathering his people to be with him and to be safe. Two women grinding at the handmill. One will be taken, the other left. You may have friends and family that are faithful disciples. That's not going to help you if you're not a faithful disciple. That's what Jesus is saying here. He talks about the householder and the thief. How many people have ever had a break-in and stuff stolen from your house or your car? Have you ever had anything stolen from your house or your car? Well, we have had one. One year when Becky and I were first married, we were getting ready to go, I think, to her parents' house to celebrate Christmas. And so we had a bunch of wrapped Christmas presents, and we were living kind of in an inner city apartment, but it was on the first floor. And so I would take a load of gifts out and stick them in the car and go back into the house and get another load of gifts and stick them in the car. So I made another trip, and I came back, and there weren't any gifts in the car. I was just going back and forth. I didn't lock the car every time I made a trip. Whoop, they were gone, Somebody came by, and that was their Christmas, I guess. It was the Grinch. He stole Christmas, It was boop, it was gone. All the Christmas presents, they were gone, And so, imagine telling all your in-laws that, well, I did get you something really nice, but it's not here. That's what happened. And so, the same way with the householder and the thief. He said, if you knew what time to expect, if God made an appointment, he said, I'm going to be at your appointment at 3:30 a.m. this morning, Jim, and that's when I'm going to come steal all your stuff. The supervisor servant. Now, this is an interesting one, and this is the one that Jesus ends on at the end of chapter 24, verse 45. Who then is the faithful and wise servant whom his master has set over his household to give them their food at the proper time? Boy, this is a sobering lesson for those of us who are leaders, who aspire to leadership in the church. In the book of Luke, chapter 12, the same parable appears, but Peter sets it up. He asks Jesus, says, is this parable for everybody, or is it for us, meaning the apostles? And Jesus said, well, let me tell you about people that are leaders. He says, you can really get in a whole lot of trouble if you're not taking care of the other servants that are under your charge. If you think, well, it doesn't really, it's, the same old, I'll just kind of punch, mail it in here. And Jesus said that kind of person, when Jesus comes back again, will be in big trouble. Well, all these stories, these illustrations, they all have the same moral, and that is, you must be ready. You must be ready. We don't like to hear this kind of preaching. I don't know the last time I heard a sermon on, Judgment Day, or what would happen if Jesus came today, or where will you spend eternity? We don't like that kind of hellfire and brimstone. But if you want to follow Jesus, in the book of Matthew, it's a big part of his message, is to live your life in a way that you will be ready, because the Son of Man will come at an hour when you do not expect him. What will your answer be? And we don't sing that song much anymore. What will your answer be? This is the way that Paul put it at the end of his great chapter on resurrection, very long chapter, 1 Corinthians 15. He said, since I've told you all about resurrection, therefore, my dear brothers and sisters, stand firm. Let nothing move you. Always give yourselves fully to the work of the Lord, because you know that your labor in the Lord is not in vain. A real argument for consistency. So what if Jesus came today? If today is the last day of your life because Jesus comes again or because you die, what would you do differently? I hope that you can say, I would do exactly what I am doing, what I plan to do today. This is the best way for me to spend, July 11th, 2021, in the Lord's kingdom. So that's the end of our lesson today. Next week, we're going to have, we probably won't get all the way through chapter 25, but 3 of Jesus' greatest stories, greatest parables in chapter 25. So we'll enjoy that study. Hope you can read some in the Gospel of Matthew this week and enjoy our study together that way. So we'll take a break now for our worship service.